Hey, welcome to the Doc Analyzes Anything, the show where science and psychology meet. We analyze human behavior, any behavior, including pretending to be an octopus. That's all it says.
Well, when you're a Red Wings fan, you have to.
Explain. I don't know this.
I don't think you have to pretend to be one, but
You
that
are
is
one.
yeah. Throwing octopi on the ice as a celebration has always been, at least for my knowledge, something that the Red Wings fans have done.
Wow. No, I didn't know
They
that.
actually started doing other things on the ice in other places. I think maybe Nashville. It was like catfish or something like that. But yeah, there's a local fish market that people would just go grab octopi before the game. I've always wondered how you get it in. Like, are you keystering this thing? Like, how are you getting it through the gates? But
I've
get
seen that a
in.
lot of people like put it in like a baggie and then wear bulky jackets because most people wear like sweatshirts or stuff like that to hockey games, and then they'll get it in that way. Because I mean, it's just a metal detector you walk through, but they still
That's true.
they still pat you down, right?
I think only if you set up the metal detector, so you're probably safe as
Okay.
long as you don't have anything there. But
How did that start? That's an odd one. And I've also seen maybe one hockey game in my life. So
I don't remember. I looked it up at one point, but I do not remember how it started. But it was a thing for a long time. Like the Zamboni driver would come out and like swing it over his head in celebration every time. Like it was a fun deal that they always did. Then the NHL decided they didn't like it, and so they started getting fined if he swung it around over his head. Like he'd get in trouble, and so now it still happens, but a little bit less frequently. And he is no longer there because he got in trouble for urinating in a bucket off ice one time.
Okay, here's what good old
trauma.
AI says. It started in 1952 during the playoffs at Olympia Stadium. Two brothers tossed an octopus on the ice. At the time, wait, what? Okay. Oh, at the time, a team only needed 8 wins to win the Stanley Cup 4-game series. So the octopus, allegedly, 8 legs symbolized those 8 wins.
Okay.
Gotcha. All
And,
right.
So it became a symbol of good luck and dominance, allegedly.
yeah, they used to have a giant, like, I don't know, 50, 100-foot octopus they'd like lower from the ceiling at the beginning of games. It was a whole thing.
Sounds
Now,
very much like a hockey game to me.
when,
When I
when
think
you,
hockey.
yeah, well, there's a lot of octopi in like on ice. It just they go together.
Sure.
When you said acting like an octopus, I immediately went to like tentacle porn or something like that, like just something weird. But
Is that a thing?
yeah, I heard about it and didn't believe it. So then I'm like,
Yeah,
of
I
course,
just heard about it.
I go like incognito, like, is this really a thing? And it turns out it was a thing.
So how does one act like an octopus, though?
I don't know.
Because my thought is, if you're swimming, you can do that kind of like motion, but then it seems more jellyfish.
I
If
was
it's
thinking
that
like you have
pulsing.
fake tentacles like in your hands and you're just swatting things with them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Zoidberg.
Zoidberg. He's an alien, all right?
He is a crab type alien.
Hooray for Zoidberg.
All right.
Yep.
Have we had enough about octopi?
So what are we doing today?
I think we pushed the limits on what we can talk about with octopus.
Yeah, it was going to get weird if we didn't stop. Today, we are giving you the ultimate, this is it, the end-all, be-all discussion of good versus bad, right and wrong, good and evil. This is it right here. We are talking about, are people naturally good or bad? So
this is the end all philosophical
there should be
thought.
There should be no argument whatsoever after we're done here. Don't even bring it up to me is what I'm saying.
Okay.
So, okay. All right.
Yeah. Be all end all. That's the word I couldn't think of there for a moment.
You said be all end all, I thought.
All right. Well, then I did think of it, and I have something else I couldn't think of. But regardless,
Only Siths deal in absolutes.
Anyways, I am your host, Dr. Steven Sparks. Along with me, as always, my co-host Kyle Surrey, and our other co-host, Dr. Meow Bradley Clements. Yes, today we will talk about the good and bad, not the Sith. as much as Brad would love to just spend the next hour talking about Star Wars. Obviously born, what, 30 years too late at that point? Maybe 40 years too late? I don't
It's a
know.
No,
franchise. It's a
I just have
franchise.
true Star Wars aficionados would just hate on me because of my love for the prequel trilogy. But to me, as much as people hate the Phantom Menace, I think it's a solid movie. Attack of the Clones also great, and arguably Anakin versus Obi-Wan in Episode 3 is the best duel. So not too late, just a different generation.
All right. I haven't seen them all. I found them entertaining from a cinematic, purpose, but I didn't care enough about the stories to have a strong feeling about one or the other.
Yeah, well, you're a Lord of the Rings kind of guy, so let's
I
quickly have a little fun debate. Who are characters? So Gollum, is Gollum good or is he bad?
He's a troubled character.
yes,
But
but
I mean, if you're gonna make the definition, let's first talk about definition of good and bad, and then bring this
all
back to
right.
Gollum because
We'll just
exactly
go straight into Gollum. Sounds good.
he's a
Um,
troubled character, but he has good and he has bad.
So here's the spoiler alert before we get into any of this. We've already touched on this in the very first episode about free will and how there's no such thing as good and bad, right or wrong. It is basically a artifact, if you will, or it is come about and created by our verbal behavior. And so if you don't have free will, if everything you've learned and experienced up to that point determines what you will do, even if you're making a choice, that choice is still determined by that learning history, then how can you be good or bad if you aren't necessarily controlling whether your actions fit in or what your actions are that fit into those categories? So, Gollum, I would very much suggest that had he never found the ring, may have been considered good. But that learning history, the things he experienced ongoing after that fact, and that influence of the ring, of that learning history, would have been what made him be what people considered bad.
Okay. And then what about Smeagol?
The same guy there.
No, Smeagol has very
Smeagol-
good intentions.
Smeagol was corrupted.
This is
You're
a
corrupted by
completely
God.
different episode on multiple personalities.
We've kind of talked about this
But-
kind of stuff before.
There is very little, if any, evidence that multiple personalities exist outside of the suggestion of multiple personalities. Like, there's been many instances
But
of
if
people...
magic's involved,
Yeah.
what about
So you're
magic,
gonna tell me
Steve?
that Gandalf is fake?
Tell me he didn't really just make fireworks fly out of his staff like that out of nowhere? Yeah, I'll finish my thought on multiple personalities and then we'll move on because I can't just leave that hanging there. But they've never been able to show an instance for sure where someone was later diagnosed with multiple personalities that they claimed it before they heard about it, if you know what I mean. It's not like something that just happened to them and they're like, oh, this is an interesting phenomenon. Someone mentioned like, oh, it's like you have two personalities, and then those personalities developed. And so there's a bit of that. Is it the suggestibility maybe? Even though it's very real to them, that it's not like something in the brain that's letting two personalities take over. But that's another episode. We'll get into that sometime in the future. So thanks for
But
taking me
is-
down that tangent.
But I think that Smeagol and Gollum is a good talk because really, as in terms of good and evil, because Gollum he was complicated. He wasn't necessarily evil, but he was very, very tormented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Let's talk about Lord of the Rings the whole time.
Well, no, because then I think that's a very fair piece on this,
I think
and
it-
especially if you bring it down to the split of Smeagol versus Gollum.
did Kyle just fall down?
No,
Great
I was
heavens!
getting my game. We could play Lord of the Rings the board game if you want to too.
We just do that instead.
I
How is that
enjoy
game?
a good epic series. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a super fan. I don't know all the details, but I do enjoy everything going back to like Homer and the Odyssey, or even like Harry Potter as like a modern epic kind of feel to it. I just enjoy those long standing. You can follow the characters and see the progression, that sort of thing. So
But yeah, for sure.
Ooh, wait a minute. You said I got another one now for you. Then is Snape good or evil?
Ah,
again, that would depend on your learning history and your you know prerogative there. If
I'm
you
talking
were
about Snape as a whole, as a person, and
yes,
is he, by definition, would you classify him as good
let's
or
get into the
evil?
definition, but also it's going to depend on, are you a fan of the Dark Lord, or are you wanting like the freedom to do your own thing? If you find the bad stuff to be more reinforcing, then he's actually bad because he's a double agent. But if you look what the rest of the Wizarding Society looked at as good, then he was good. He was just hiding it. So
he was
again,
hiding it for. Oh, I
He was a
forget how to.
closeted good man.
There you go.
let's get into again refresher about the three levels of selection here. I mean, there's culturally, what do we call good and bad? The cultural selection. What does the group as a whole of your culture, whether it's your town, your city, your friend group, your entire nation, or the entire planet, agree what's good and bad? Or I guess, what is the majority rule is good or bad? There's what you personally believe is good or bad. And then, from a natural selection, you could talk about what's good or bad for like the survival of the species, or for your survival, like physically yourself. But there's so many different levels to what good and bad could be. We have to be a little bit, careful on trying to talk about these absolutes, and giving this kind of ultimatum: is this person good or bad? Especially when those things shift and change over time, like we often see now with cancel culture, where you did something that wasn't considered so bad 50 years ago, or look at like the founding fathers, how everybody looks back and like, oh, they kind of sucked, now that we know what they were really like and look at them in the
Depends
context
on
of
who you
today.
are. Depends on who you
That's
are.
true. That's true. But in the context of what is considered appropriate today, a lot of what they did, they'd be, kicked out of office, canceled, unless they got some weird cult following that thought they were Jesus if they put themselves in a
They
photo of
did
a
know how to
hospital
throw a
room
good
or
party,
something.
though.
So it does sound like they partied pretty well. I can't remember I read somewhere at one point basically like how much alcohol and other things were delivered like while they were doing
It
like
was
writing the
ungodly. Like
yeah.
no
Whoa,
human
really?
would be walking for like a week after what was the number of people that were there, and then the amount of alcohol that they
Yeah.
consumed.
While writing like the Constitution and or the
Yeah.
Congress,
Oh man, I didn't know
This is like
that.
I don't know if you guys have seen all the Hunger Games stuff, but like with how the Hunger Games was created, 'cause they were drunk when they wrote up the idea of what the Hunger Games could be. That's what the Constitution was. Because then the next morning, the guy wakes up and he's sober and he's like, "Oh my God, what did I do?" That's what our founding fathers were like when they woke up and saw
yeah,
these things.
if they woke up. But
If they woke up,
we're basically living in Hunger Games, so I don't know what you mean if we've seen it. Like, this is it. This is the beginning here. Also, though, talking about the cultural selection, like, it depends on what subcultures you're in, will depend on what you think is good or bad also. Like, in Christianity, you'd say that humans, at least in theory, are naturally bad or evil because they were born with original sin. And you have to ask for that forgiveness, take Jesus into your heart, that whole process in general, to then absolve yourself of that sin, and then you become good. And where, see, where was I at with that?
Not become well, depending on. I can interject here. Not
Yeah,
become
go for it.
good. Not become good per se, but made allowed to be like you're still bad, but uh you're not like penalized for it.
Yeah, well, you may be
And
still bad. That may still,
it depends on
y-
the sect too.
yeah. And like, if you're truly evil, you wouldn't get into heaven, but you're good enough now. You're not evil, you're just not good. You know what I mean? Like, there's
you're
some
just not
gray area
good.
there. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's that
Yeah.
I was very much oversimplifying that, but um then you look at people, especially when we're getting around politics time, which is seems like it's all the time now, but especially
Politics
around the
time.
elections, and people I constantly seeing these, kind of out there posts about how we just need to do away with government. People will do the right thing, and then, you know, people are generally good. And hey, if not, I've got my gun to protect myself, and so so be it. Um, and we'll get to it more about what is truly, freedom. And another time, I'm sure we talk about what government is in general and why, as a species, we allow these people, these fools, to tell us what to do all the time. But obviously, without like the development and uh, creation of rules or laws for our species as a whole, required verbal behavior and really started to come about around the time of where we started getting from those hunter gatherers into larger groups, larger societies. I think you just have to go back historically and look, like, there is a very good reason that we have to have laws and people to enforce them. Otherwise, you will just take whatever you want, and to you that's good, and to someone else that's bad.
But things that were against the law years ago would be considered fine today too. And that's going back to that cultural selection. Like, we
Yeah.
change our
Yeah.
minds.
I've got a list of things that kind of tie that all in together at the end. So we'll get into some of those ideas
I want to talk about it
here.
now.
You're gonna mess up my whole flow, man. Did you look at the notes?
I'm
No,
looking
you
at
did
them.
Okay.
I did.
For once.
Well, I
There
had
you go.
time today.
All for once and once for all.
Yeah. All right. So first, we'll just go straight Three Musketeers, or
I'm on a roll today.
the Three Amigos, preferably.
There you
So yeah, let's get into what is the definition of good and bad, just because let's make sure we're kind of all on the same page here. Turns out, and I probably shouldn't be surprising, there are a lot of definitions for good. There's a lot under there. There's fewer for bad, but it's still a lot. But there's being of favorable character or tendency. So something's like good news, good fortune, good grades, something good land, a high desired quality. It also means suitable or fit. Like
go. Mhm.
the example from our good old friend Webster here was a good apple for baking. That must have been something that,
Yeah.
I mean, like, obviously you have to have a good apple, but think about a bad apple or a good apple and how that's used in our language nowadays. Maybe that was something that was just talked about a lot more in human history. I'm not sure.
I hear bad egg a lot. He's a bad
Yeah.
egg.
Yeah. Maybe it's rotten apple. I don't know. But rotten apple spoils the bunch, isn't that what they say?
I don't know.
Suitable to eat or drink, so not spoiled, agreeable or pleasant. Um, of good size, so noticeably large size, amount, or quantity. Um, well-rounded, sensible. There's a lot of them, but I think when we get into what people are really talking about, it's way down at the bottom of the list, which I thought was fairly entertaining. But it's talking about being virtuous, moral, and ethical as being a good person, or being kind and benevolent. And so probably a little bit of mix between that, the round, founded and sensible, and agreeable or pleasant. But just knowing that we don't even have just one definition of what good is, but it can mean so many different things, I think already puts you a little bit behind the eight ball, determining whether people are naturally good or bad a little bit as well.
Just because there's not even agreement necessarily on
Yeah.
one. I mean, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, with, like, in our field, we have what we call inner observer agreement. So you can't even say that you've seen a scientific phenomenon unless multiple people agree on that occurrence.
Yes.
And so here, if we don't necessarily agree that we are all talking about the same thing, then and again, the last one that I wrote down was behaving properly, which gets into it again, like, what is proper to you? Then
Right.
it's going to be hard to say whether anybody could ever be just good or bad.
Right. No, that's a good, yeah. Depending on your definition, of proper, which will vary person to person.
So, definition of bad again. Our good old friend Webster. We should have him on the show sometime. Good old Webby. It's like I like to call him. So bad is failing to reach an acceptable standard. So poor, like a bad repair job, something that's unfavorable, like a bad impression, spoiled, dilapidated, evil, mischievous, disobedient. And, to me, I find at least a certain level of being mischievous to be reinforcing. And so as long as you're not being cruel with it, I find that as a positive or a good thing, not a bad thing. It's kind of fun. Um, uh,
It wasn't evil
disagreeable.
until it was.
Yeah, right. It's like throwing a water balloon at somebody. No, you rascal. Throwing a rotten egg at somebody. All right, now we
You're
have
bad.
a problem. Yeah.
You're an evil person.
Yeah. Being injurious or harmful, incorrect or faulty, harmful or sorry. So like bad feelings, invalid or void. Again, most of the time I think people treat bad and evil as if they are the same thing, but nobody's going to have a set definition of what those things are. Everybody's going to have their own kind of ideas and how they work interchangeably. And so, first of all, if you're going to say someone is good or bad, I think you almost need a universal definition, which would be virtually impossible because not everybody agrees with it. And then from there, now how are you judging that person based on the social norms and their own personal norms as well?
There's a lot. So, like, yes, I agree. Devil's advocate, there is pretty universally agreed on bad things, though, right? Like, even from the beginning of like natural known history, murder's pretty much always been bad.
I would say probably not prior to our developing complex language. It was just like
See,
animals out there hunting and killing and doing what you need to do to survive. If we're talking early, and again, we have the picture of the caveman days. We don't know what it was really like, but
right.
picture early caveman days and the cartoons. You go over, club the person, and steal their meat or whatever it is because they did a better job hunting than you.
Yeah.
Without the rule that you tell yourself that was bad, it wouldn't be any different than like a wolf killing a rabbit.
But there would be like an agreed on, well, and I don't know. I'm no expert on the cavemen, but if one caveman was taking everybody else's stuff, there would probably be at least some general behavior attitude towards that caveman, like stay away from him or maybe retaliate as a group
So
because he's being bad.
to live in a group, you couldn't just walk around killing people as you want and taking their things. But if you're not living in a group or if you're living in rival groups, would killing the group from that other group, or people from that other group be considered bad? When we go to war, we don't say, that was bad. Well, we sometimes do, but in general, you're not sitting there thinking like it was bad that those soldiers killed each other, because it is what happens in war. And so universal is where the issue is there. But since we started living in groups, and to hit your point home probably further, you would have those native groups. I consider just like the Native Americans and the little bit of history I know where some were much more violent than others. And so you knew that, all right, if they're coming, you get out of here. These other groups, they're more likely to be friendly, and you would learn those things and learn how to stay away or what to do depending on who you're interacting with. But it wasn't probably until the Europeans came and tried to set up their version of society that those people really considered good or bad, except for if you were the victim, then you would think they're bad. And so getting into what we're really talking about, we're talking about reinforcement and punishment. If something is good to you, it's reinforcing. And if someone else finds it aversive, it's punishing. And so what is good to me may be bad to another person and vice versa. And so that's why we tend to look at the group as a whole and say, okay, here's what 300 million people in the United States. What do we all think of together as being good or bad? Um, Generally nowadays, people think of, you should be able to love whoever you want. You know what I mean? Whether like whatever type of relationship that is. Um, but you think like going back to probably early Christianity, it was illegal for most of you, like, that time period until, I don't know, 50, 100 years ago, not even 100 years ago. It was illegal to be homosexual, and they didn't even know what the rest of the LGBTQ community was, and it was just, hey, if it's not heterosexual, it's against the law. So again, it wasn't bad. It became bad. It's no longer bad. Although a lot of people do think it's bad, at least in the United States, based on what the polls say, it is more approved than it is disapproved of, if that is what you
No, that
will.
makes
But
sense. There's
That
you,
that's clear, but in the delivery of that, and that was a map for people to track.
I gotcha. I'm trying to paint a picture here. I'm not trying to give you a definition of good or bad. That's kind of the point.
This is that it was the show that It's Always Sunny, and the guy standing by the board with all the pins and yarn, and
Yeah. Well, the point is society as a whole is going to choose again what is good or bad. It's reinforcing to somebody to be able to love who they want. For much of society, it is reinforcing to see someone be happy with who they want to be with. And then there's a small set who find that very punishing to see someone love other than what their picture of what's right and wrong is. And so again, reinforcing or punishing, we're just talking about, what it is for you. Um, on a more individual level rather than a societal level, people's ideas of good and bad change depending on the situation they're in. And if you can't agree with yourself, or maybe you're just, trying to make yourself feel better about not being bad because of something that normally you'd be against, but because of your situation, you're not against. It's hard to have society agree on it as well. And so I thought about like Aladdin stealing the bread because he's starving. Is he good or bad? Probably people could argue both ways. How about when he gave it to the starving kids? Probably a lot fewer people are going to argue that he's bad. But
the Robin Hood scenario.
yeah, if he had a ton of money and he was just being a jerk going around stealing stuff, then everybody would be like, no, he was kind of a jerk. You know what I mean?
hey, Gollum led him to Mordor.
And
He did.
but
He did,
that's because the whole time he wanted to steal the ring.
but he still did it.
What was the reinforcer though? That's actually very similar to that though. We could talk about someone who has an addiction, you know what I mean? To them in that moment, doing what you have to do to prevent withdrawals, which could potentially be, life ending if you don't, curb those. Breaking into a house and stealing something may be good to that person, even though society as a whole says it's bad. And
Right.
I don't think very many people would argue that they should be, or anybody would argue that they should be allowed to do it. But should we really say that's a bad person? I think that's hard to argue for. And I'll go back to one story. It's probably either a decade ago. This may have actually gone back to like 2008 recession times, or somewhere in that time period. But there was a gentleman who had lost everything, was hungry, it was cold out, needed a meal, needed a warm place to stay. And so I remember he went into a bank, robbed it, elderly man, just sat down and waited for police because at least he could go to jail and have a warm place to stay and find something to eat. Was he good or bad? I mean, sure, he maybe traumatized somebody there, but he didn't even want the money. It was just about, hey, I got to find a way to survive here. And jail
Yeah.
sounds better than being unhoused at the moment. So
Get 3 meals a day in jail.
if you call them meals,
He
but-
couldn't have gone for a lesser crime.
I mean, depends
I mean, that's
on
the only way that I'll say the good versus evil. Like, there's a lot. If that was his sole thing that he wanted, he could have done something else.
So there was a saying when I was in grad school, and it wasn't one of my areas of interest, so I don't remember it perfectly, but it went something along the lines of a choice is only a choice if you're aware of that choice and know how to act upon it. So if he
Mm.
didn't know about other alternatives, or they were unsuccessful, or he was worried, I'm just gonna be released again tomorrow if I do something petty, but this way I'm actually getting to stay there at least for the rest of the winter time, maybe a year or two, and then maybe there'll be a reentry program. You can't know what his situation like specifically was without looking more into it to even really judge that one way or the other. So again, I think as society, we always jump to good or bad conclusions with not even inferior information, almost no information. It makes us kind of look like fools much of the time when we get more information, figure out what was really going on. But uh, it is the way our society tends to work. And so, if nothing else, maybe take a step back and try to get the full picture before you start going out there and raising hell about something you don't know anything about, you know?
That's a good point.
So, we talk about how we can't even decide on what's good and bad individually as a culture, temporally over time, what is good or bad to determine if people are good or bad. And then there's been some potentially we'd call them bad experiments that that hammer this fact home too that people will switch from good or bad depending on the situation, the culture around them as well. And so I say bad because they're extremely frowned upon and would never be allowed nowadays. But I think there's a good chance many of the people listening here are familiar with the Stanford prison experiment.
Sure.
And,
This
you
one's
know,
so interesting to me.
I know I've heard of it. Can you break it down a little bit more so I can be better involved in this conversation?
sure, I have it written down here, but Kyle, do you
More
want to
involved.
give it a
I
crack?
can, yeah. Yeah. Well, you might have more information written down. The experiment was imprisoning grad students as a like a real prison, a real like scenario where they simulated a prison experience. Then so half of the participants were prisoners, half were security in the prison, like police officers. And basically, what happened was maybe I've it might be better if you tie this in, Steve. The prison guards essentially resorted to more and more violent measures of controlling the their population.
Yeah.
Um, and why? What you have more detail?
So this was 1971 at Stanford University. So we're not talking about they like took over a jail and did this. Participants were offered $15, which according to this article was equivalent to 119.25 in the year 2025. So if you want to know exactly when and how much it was worth. But they actually got the local police involved. People were, obviously not legally, but they were arrested, brought in handcuffs, changed. They went through the whole prison process. They wanted to make it feel as real as possible. And this was supposed to be a 2-week experiment to see, did the prisoners take on prisoner type behavior? Did the guards take on like authoritative, almost abusive type behavior? And is it that the social aspect of this is what causes people to behave the way they did, not that there's something naturally good or bad about them? And when you look at the, people arguing against this research saying it's not real, there's some suggestion that maybe the experimenter whose name was Zimbardo um may have coached them to be a little bit more authoritarian, gave them a script to follow kind of to set it up. But what they really found was, you know, during this experiment, which actually only lasted 6 days because it got so bad that they had to cut it off. But the prisoners resorted to acting like prisoners, were combative, abusive verbally against the guards, and the guards became extremely authoritarian. I don't know about physical abuse, but would do things like isolation, a lot of psychological abuse, and it really quickly turned into two people off the street who may have had identical backgrounds, been in the same class together, friends a week before, were put in a situation where the culture took over and they were not only enemies but truly horrible to each other.
And okay, but like no one that was placed into this situation were unaware of what was. Everyone was aware of what was going on.
They were all aware of what's going on. They all knew it was an experiment. This was the whole thing was very upfront, but it's it's like that the the behavior of the mass is what I'm trying to think of, like taking over and like you just follow with what they basically developed
Group
new
think.
cultural. Yeah, they developed this cultural norm from one versus the other and dove deeply into it, even though the crimes weren't even real.
Mm.
And it very much looked like and mimicked what happened in what we see in prisons. And so I'm sure we'll touch on this again briefly when we talk about prisons in another episode, because it would be very easy to design prisons in a way, that actually did rehabilitate and help people get on their feet and not offend again, rather than just being this, society based on punishment. But this says, like, to them, they were good, the others were bad on both sides. There was a true clear cut good and bad, right and wrong, good and evil. Yet the entire circumstance was made up and they were aware of it. And they still dove that deeply into those cultural norms that were basically designed in the moment that they stepped foot in this experiment.
Because is it a Netflix documentary or is it just a movie? Because they covered this as a whole. Because my brother, I know he's watched it a couple of times.
I know they made the actual like, cinematic movie of it, and I know there have been documentaries, but I don't know about what's on Netflix or what
Okay.
he watched. But yeah, like they said, it spiraled to rapid dehumanization, psychological
That's right.
abuse, um, and there's like distress, and they required submission of the prisoners. They called it just brutal. Basically, it was
Interesting.
absolute breakdown. So, and again, I think the shocking part of that, even if you had this, instruction, I can't remember the name of the other experiment. The one where the people went into the experiment, the people being experimented on, they were sitting in the chair or hooked up to electrodes, were actually actors, and then they were told to shock the person to different degrees to see how much pain a random person off the street would inflict on someone that they don't know. I'm trying to remember, was that like on incorrect answers or something else that they were trying to suggest that they were punishing? But the whole experiment was really for the people that were providing the shock to see how much pain would they do it, and like under the
Yeah.
instructions of this person that they saw as an authority figure, they'd like crank it way up, way more than anybody would feel comfortable doing in most situations.
That was
Eh,
Milgram, right?
Was
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Milgram.
so it's it's one of these things where it's almost like once culture says this is no longer bad in this moment because of what's going on here, then it no longer becomes bad to you, and you may be likely to do something that you wouldn't normally be comfortable with, as long as like that small momentary society says it's okay.
That one was interesting because it took place around, fact check me on this. I thought it took a place around the same time as the like Nazi trials after World War II, as part of the like explanation of like we were just following orders type of thing, or like
Yeah.
actions essentially don't become bad when everybody's doing them, and they're clearly bad on paper, but when everybody's doing it, and yeah, I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah. I don't remember the timing of that one, but that would make a lot of sense. And and that's, I think, too, again, in wartime, I think I'm sure many of us have known people that come back, and once they re-enter our society, they're just kind of shaken by what they did over there because it was normal within that culture that they were in at that
Right.
moment. And I've known people that said, I had to kill somebody because they had a weapon, but it was a mother and child that was
Mm.
coming after me. I had to choose to live or die, but at the same time, I can't shake the fact that this is who I had to shoot at. When, in any other aspect of life, that would have been the worst thing I could have possibly done,
Right.
So here's one that's probably even more brutal, shocking. I came across this probably 6 months to a year ago and wrote it down just to talk about at some point, and it fits in quite clearly. Uh, has anybody heard of Marina Abramovich and her Rhythm series? It's performance art.
Nope.
No.
She did several different pieces in this, series. And they were all extreme. Like at one point, she, I think, put herself in a box or some wood contraption, set on fire, and stayed there until the lack of oxygen made her lose consciousness, and people had to pull her out. Like very much a statement on, good versus bad, and not as a good versus bad, but death versus pleasure, and the way society was. So Rhythm Zero.
Okay, yeah. I was like, so what was the box?
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking. It sounded like he's coming to a conclusion.
No, that was just one of the other ones. This is we're changing topics slightly to another part of her series. But I don't know. I don't necessarily understand performance art. I think I'm not
He's
sure if
explaining something to us, then yeah, I don't know.
no, I don't. Art is another episode. It's the eye of the beholder, and I do not have that eye. But um just an aside, one time when Taylor and I were first dating, we went to Art Prize in Grand Rapids, which was a giant kind of art festival, um, big money prizes, and like the whole city's taken over. You go into certain shops and there's different installations, different places. And we walked into one, and it was just a video of people talking about the first time they heard the Macarena, with it playing quietly in the background and how it had an impact on them. And then as we're sitting there, the video goes off and then the music gets louder and everybody around us starts dancing to the Macarena. And I'm like, I can't tell if I am in a piece of performance art here, or if these people really just randomly started dancing to this music like that, or what's happening, but I need to leave. And so that is my one experience personally with performance art that shows I just did not get it, but that's all right.
So what are the other
Anyways,
things about her?
Rhythm Zero.
Okay.
This was the one that like really to me was the most shocking. So 1974, it was ended after 6 hours of a performance. It was meant to be longer. She walked into a room, put down 72 items on a table, and like a sign that says, do what you want to me. And it was certain things were meant to represent pleasure, like a candle, a rose, feathers. I think they might have said grapes, but I couldn't find that again. And then others were meant to represent pain, like scissors, scalpel, chains, and axe. And then some were even meant to represent death. There was a loaded pistol left on this table. And basically,
Good grief.
people off the street were just allowed into this room to do what they wanted as part of this art. And in her own words, she talks about how they were playing with her. It was like, tickling with the feather and doing different things and putting her in weird positions just for fun. But over time, the group mentality kind of shifted, and it became that whole like, we're all in this together. There's nothing good or bad about this because we have this insinuated consent that wasn't actually given. It
Right.
was just, hey, do what you want. And so it got to the point where at a time someone cut her with a knife to drink her blood. They're cutting
Whoa.
her clothes off of her. She was being sexually assaulted, carrying her around half naked, putting her in different positions, um, stuck like a knife hard into the wood right next to her, like to make her think she was going to be stabbed. And they actually ended it at one point because someone put the bullet in the pistol and put her
Jeez.
hand on it and like was trying to see if she would prevent them from pulling the trigger as
Whoa.
like to shoot herself.
Wait, and so okay. And was there like a progressive nature to this, or did it, from what things say, was it all like pretty like quote unquote normal stuff happening, and then all of a sudden one person opened the floodgate and it all changed?
It seems like, and I didn't read the full documentation, but it seems like it was a progression. Like, oh, all right, someone did something slightly like that would be inappropriate in any other setting, but because of this idea that says do what you want, all right, now I touched someone that would be inappropriate to someone else, but in this art installation it's not. And like, oh, nothing bad happened. And like I have a feeling it was this progression of things that very early on probably crossed lines that we would say, nope, can't do that. But it then allowed things to get way beyond that point to being like, they said at one point, I don't know if it was talking about the same one or not with the gun, but someone like pointed the gun and another bystander like stepped in and that was it. The sexual assaults,
Jeez.
the cutting, the licking, the blood, all these other things, as a group mentality, we are now saying that this is okay. It is no longer bad because it is allowed in this scenario. But that was where someone finally drew the line. It was death. That was it. That was the one.
I mean, that
Jeez.
speaks a lot towards humanity then.
Well, and again, though, would you ever purposely, unless you were in a really tough situation, do something you consider bad? Most people, not really. But when the scenario changes, when the group says this is now allowed, this isn't bad per se. It is no longer punishing to know that I have committed this behavior. At least until I get back into the real world, I'm like, oh shit, what just happened? What did I do?
Right.
How
Did the
can you
people
even
that did
determine?
it, did they see her afterwards, like after the fact?
So she says that at the end, when they, had to stop it, it was getting too bad. She said after 6 hours, she gets up, standing there, walking naked, covered in blood, and tears in her eyes, and the whole room just scattered and ran away from her.
Jeez. Yeah.
Because she
They were-
revealed that, like they saw what they did, the effect.
Yes, and she basically ended the show or this feeling that it made it real. It probably felt almost dreamlike to be able to be doing these things to the onlookers or to the participants. And then once that kind of feeling was shattered, then all of a sudden it was horrible. And like, oh my God, what did we do? And then they ran away.
And did she ever reflect more on it? So like days to weeks to months to years after?
This was her thing, and she's still alive. She was born in the 40s, so she, I think, has to be in her 80s now. But from what I can tell, she's still alive. And she went on to do maybe not this specifically, but a lot more. She did more extreme things, not much more extreme than this, but she continued to do extreme things throughout the rest of her career as performance art. And so
And
this did not seem
what's
to
her
deter
name?
her.
What, Abramovich?
It was, let's see,
Abramovich.
yeah, Marina.
Marina.
If anybody wants to look it up, Rhythm Zero will find it for you. But Marina,
Yeah, no, I'd be curious.
ABRA
'Cause this is crazy.
MOVIC.
Or, sorry, I
So
shouldn't say crazy. This is very abnormal.
no, this is pretty crazy.
Would you do this, Brad, for $100,000 with the loaded gun and everything?
No, I don't trust society enough. Nor do I even want like the idea of like the potential of someone cutting me with a knife and I have to not react. No, that sounds
Yeah.
horrible.
I think
I would have to get generational wealth tossed at me.
And when you read her story too, like you're talking, she grew up, I think, in some really military Soviet, situations where
She's Russian. This was nothing to her then.
I don't think you could just say that, but sure.
I mean that as they're built hardcore.
I get what you're saying. No, but I think it was like Cold War, very militarized. Like she is making a statement on how rough and cold the world can be with her art because she grew up in that. I think they said something about her parents were both in the military and very much an authoritarian household. And I think she was willing to give her life, or at least in theory, give the potential of someone taking her life to make a statement like this for the sake of her art. So she did a lot more, like I said, maybe not similar, but different things. But this is the one, to me, it was just shows just where those boundaries between good and bad get crossed when you have this mob mentality. That's what I was trying to think of earlier. The mob mentality of like what is good and bad in that moment, what's okay and what's not.
Yeah. And how context paints so much more of a picture than concrete. rules. It's really interesting.
So maybe not lighter. It's still going to be kind of dark here, but we talk about like finishing up on those things that are okay now that are used to be taboo or bad, and then also some things that used to be fine, and now we look at them and they'd be like, nope, that should have never been allowed. So, um, we talked about a couple already with sexuality. We don't need to bring like those same ones up again, but cohabitation or sex before marriage just is pretty much commonplace now. But you would have been shunned by your whole community, probably what, just 1920s or earlier, maybe after that.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Most of my context, I have to say, is from Europe and England because I've read all those old mystery novels recently that took place in those times, and they'll talk about, oh, I can't believe they did this. They're gonna have to leave the town or whatever because no one's gonna look at them the same. So I don't really have a good idea of when that was, but it seems like 1920s, 30s are probably around there. Um, Divorce, I mean, that's probably the last 50-ish years that's been really not even that frowned upon for most part anymore.
With celebrities, it's encouraged.
Yeah.
It
Um,
wasn't even allowed. Like the woman in the relationship wasn't even allowed, right? Like the man was the only one who could
yeah, for a long
file.
time,
Yeah.
they couldn't even have that decision. Uh, Tattoos, which of course I think are horrible. It's not like I have my own share or anything. Um, and that the tattoos, both tattoos and I think piercing, like ear piercings in men, were like that. I think World War One, World War Two, the sailors coming back and they have both, and that's kind of when it started to shift. But you still wouldn't see that out in the workplace until what, maybe late '90s, early 2000s, like in an
Yeah.
office building, probably.
Yeah. You had to cover them up.
Yeah, because what's the yakuza?
Oh, that's in Japan, but yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah, but even
Yakuza,
still, just like that same
that
idea of like the not abnormal, but like hiding.
that was an interesting one because they were, and I believe it may have been depending on how high in the Yakuza you were, but as you reached the top, you were supposed to have basically your entire body tattooed in these colorful tattoos, but you'd be arrested for being in the Yakuza if you were found to have those tattoos. So I think tattoos in general for a time were illegal, but also they cut them off at the neck, the wrists, and the ankles, and so you could wear a suit and not be recognized as being affiliated. And then you took your shirt off and rolled up your sleeves, and your whole body's just covered.
It's a badass move.
Uh, Saw a story. I have no idea if it's true or not, and didn't look into it anymore. But of a man that I believe was, 70s, 80s, who had his shirt off while watering his lawn and had the tattoos and was arrested just because they tied him to crimes many
Oh
years
man.
later. So, um, some substance use, like, pot, for instance. I mean, what, back early colonial times in the United States, I'm pretty sure everybody was smoking pot.
I think
Then,
Washington had his hemp farms.
yeah, hemp still is ridiculous that it's not used more because it's so much more sustainable. But just the getting high part and the changes in that, and now it comes back around full circle, and it was just what, maybe 100-ish years where it was looked at so badly. Alcohol didn't last even that long. Mm. And even like public displays of affection and holding would have been horribly frowned upon at times in our society 100 years ago or so. Like you may have been there together, but you weren't, you know, showing that you cared for the other person or even smiling in a photograph unless you had to console them because something bad happened, maybe. So, um, and the things that used to be fine that nowadays we'd be just shocked and appalled by. Uh, it's what, like 20-ish years that smoking in buildings has been taboo. Yet, like nowadays, you see someone smoking in a bar. Brad, you were talking about it, where you walked
What's that?
into yeah, where you were in Tennessee or something, and people were smoking in a bar, and you were just like, that was shocking.
Yeah, and but and it, yeah, even though like you think about the classic stimulus pairing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That go hand in hand because every single bar will have a smoking area outside. But yeah, the idea of seeing it indoors, that's just triple look.
Yeah. I've known many a person who only smoked after a period of their life while drinking, and that's why some places I think like bowling alleys, maybe you're even still allowed to smoke in some bowling alleys because certain activities just are kind of paired together, and they were afraid that they would be completely put out of business if they weren't still allowed. Um, so
I've never seen The Big Lebowski, but do they drink
Oh,
in that movie,
we
or do
should
they
watch that
smoke in that
together.
movie?
yeah, we should just watch that whole episode. We won't even
It's
do the episode. We'll
commentary.
just
No,
watch it.
we'll provide commentary.
I don't think he doesn't smoke. Does anybody smoke in that?
That's been a while.
He smokes pot and he
Yeah.
drinks White Russians, but that's about it.
Okay.
LSD at some point, but I don't even like know if he meant to do that. I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
It's been forever since I've seen that movie.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I still know like most of it by heart. That's a nice
That's on my
varmint,
list of
man.
movies I know I need to watch.
You're out of your element, Donnie.
Goes to show that there is no agreement on what right and wrong is, and it moves and changes over time. So to say a person is inherently good or bad just is not even really an argument. It doesn't make sense to have that discussion. And instead, we should be looking about what are the social norms, what are the reinforcers and punishments set, in place by society, as well as learned by that individual. And so if you have someone that does something that the rest of society says is bad, sure, you can say lock them up, throw away the key, punish them because that was bad and they're a bad person. But also you could, change and help them shift what they find reinforcing and punishing, and maybe get them to fit society norms instead of just saying nope, they're a bad egg, just toss them out.
Yeah. I mean, you're still operating within the confines of what you know and what a society knows, and part of what they know is what they've agreed on to be right or wrong. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation, I think, because yeah, like I don't know, I know what you're saying, but I still think there is good and bad.
There is good, bad, right, and wrong, but it is not a thing. It is a process. It's a reification. It is what society as a whole is determining their morals are. And so
Yes.
the original question wasn't, and I may have said, do good and bad exist later on? But the original question is, are people naturally good or bad? Is it innate, built within them, part of them? And that is where the discussion doesn't make sense, because there is no such thing as naturally good or bad. It is just
Yes.
what does society say is good or bad at that moment.
Gotcha. Agreed. I agree on that.
Any other thoughts? Anything you want to hammer home or ask questions about?
I don't think
No?
so. I want to go watch Lord of the Rings now,
I know. Lord of the Rings always sounds good.
which I just did like a few days ago.
Do you watch the extended editions, or do you watch the...
I do. Yeah, we watch it pretty regularly at our house.
Yeah, it's one of those, I think you should just do it. You're going to get more out of it. It is more of an adventure. It takes longer, but it's worth it in the end.
I now treat those movies just like Harry Potter, where like there's nothing on and I just need something on that I'm so comfortable with that if I miss 20 minutes of it, I still know what's happening. And so I
Yeah.
just throw those on as kind of like my soundtrack to my life as I sit around the house.
Takes
This
me
morning,
back
as I was
to
getting ready for the day, I put on Lord of the Ring ambiance music from YouTube.
yeah, nice.
I've never listened to just the music, but
It's so settling.
It takes me to my
Middle
boys
Earth.
a few years ago. My boys really wanted me to read them Lord of the Rings, so we read through them. It was very good times. They were on the edges of their seats every night. It was good, even through the very very arduous. There's a lot of like laboring chapters in those books where you have to read quite a bit.
yeah, I actually, because I was out of things to listen to or read for a while, like went back through and did all the like other supplementary stories to figure out the
Yeah.
deeper histories and that sort of thing. And so
Silmarillion and stuff. Or
yeah,
yeah,
that
that's
some
getting
of
in the
those got
weeds.
some of those got kind of hard to follow, but
They are
uh,
nerds.
yeah,
for sure.
I will say The Hobbit was the first book that I actually read in school. Like, you know how you're supposed to read as part of your and then discuss it in class, and I just never bothered because I was gonna get the story from everybody else talking about it. So what's the matter? But
Sparknotes.com.
yeah, it was in high school in The Hobbit. I'm actually enjoying this. I will read it. And so, alrighty then, let's end this up. If you got nothing else, let's just remember. We talked about a lot of hard topics, some not so difficult to hear about, a lot of discussion what good and bad is, and try to look towards the good that society says is good. Try to find those brighter pieces that make you really feel comfortable and feel like society and the world maybe isn't such a bad place. And just concentrate on those so you can try to enjoy your days. Is you never know, how much time you have left or how much time civilization has left. So it's just it could be any day now that devil on your shoulder might get fed up with all your insolence and thrust the trident deeper down your ear canal than it should, and that's it for you. So yeah, be careful and just enjoy what you can.
I think about that every day. Devil on my shoulder.